Welcome to Liesel's Artistic Studio. Today we're going to be completing part 2 of 2, drawing and painting wild roses. Now, if you missed last week's tutorial, I went over step by step how to draw these flowers for yourself if that is something that you like to do. I'll have that posted at the end of this video if you're interested in going back and watching that to get ready for today's painting portion. But I know many of you would rather use a printout PDF version, so for the next 3 days, this outline drawing is available as a free PDF, or you can get it for a small price on my Etsy shop. Both of those links are available in the description of this video. Alright, moving on to the supplies needed for today's painting. First, of course, we'll have our watercolor paper with the wild roses drawn on it very lightly with pencil. The main brush I'm using today is a number 10 round with a nice pointy tip, but later on I will also pull out a smaller round for some detail work. I also have water, a paper towel, and of course watercolor paints. Now I've only got 3 colors today: Alizarin Crimson, Azo Yellow, and Sap Green. For any details or information on the supplies I'm using, you can find that in the description of this video. After you've got your pencil outline drawn or traced, if you'd like to, tape it down with some artist tape to help prevent some warping. Then we're ready to paint. Okay, let's jump right in here and start painting the main roses by using the wet on wet technique. So first, paint one petal using only water first, and then after it's wet with water, we'll begin to add in small amounts of color and we'll let it spread and blend. The first color I'll place on the petal is some of the Alizarin Crimson. I'll paint that mostly around the edges with maybe a little bit in the middle area. Then I'll rinse my brush and use the damp brush to help spread the color to the majority of the remaining area, leaving a small empty space near the inner part of the petal where I can add in a touch of Azo Yellow. Something important to know is that I am keeping this fairly light in value by not using too much paint and by adding a little extra water to my paint. Now, after the yellow has been painted, I'll finish this petal off by adding some more Alizarin Crimson right here in the innermost part of the petal. The good news for you is that once you've got that down, the majority of the remaining petals are going to be painted in that exact same way. So just keep working one petal at a time. You know, as we sit here painting, I was just thinking how much I would love to have a chance to see how your paintings are turning out. In fact, a few of you have shared some of your paintings with me on my Facebook page, so I'll just throw out there as a side note, if any of you would like to show me the artwork you've created through using my tutorials, I would love to see it. I'll leave a link to my Facebook page in the description of this video if you'd like to do that. Painting the rest of these petals takes a few minutes, so just relax to the music while we enjoy watching this painting start to come to life. Now, when we get to this folded over petal here, I'm going to paint it slightly different than the others. I'm going to paint this little section a really nice dark value of pink and yellow to set it apart from the rest of the petal, and this is going to create the look of a shadow. Then, after I've completed this little sliver of color, I'm going to skip the rest of this petal and the petal right next to it until it has had a chance to dry. So let's move on to the next flower, and we'll come back to the rest of this one in just a minute. Now, if you ever find that this center pink color is spreading farther than you'd like into the petal, like mine is doing here, then rinse and dry your brush. Then use the bristles to soak or wipe off some of that extra color. Then wipe that color onto your paper towel and repeat that until you get it how you like. Now that these petals are dry on this first rose, I'm going to really quickly come back in here and finish it off. So here on this folded petal, after I've painted a base layer of water, I'll add a super small amount of alizarin crimson to this one edge. Then I'll spread it with water so that the color stays very light in value. Then I'll continue moving on as before. All right, congratulations. Now we've completed the most important element of this painting. Now moving on, let's paint the flower buds. For right now, focus just on the pink petals of the buds going around the greenery. We're going to paint this with the alizarin crimson, and I'm painting it straight on there without any water first. Now that all the pink areas are done on this painting, let's move on to some of the green. Now, before we get started, I do recommend getting some fresh water. First, let's put a little splash of light green color into the background. I'm just wetting down and adding water near and around the roses and the buds. I'm focusing this background mostly at the leafy areas, and instead of painting around the leaves, I'm just going to paint right over the tops of them. So after you've got the water down in this area, then add some touches of sap green and let it start to spread. Keep in mind that this color needs to be light in value so that we can come back in later and paint the leaves a darker value of green over the top. If you need to, you can even use your paper towel and dab off some of the edges to soften up some of those harsh lines a little bit. While we wait for that background area to dry, I'm going to go ahead and take some azo yellow and add that to the center of the roses. Then when the background is completely dry, we can start painting the rose leaves using the sap green. I'm just kind of painting these one half at a time, and it might even be fun to leave a small white or unpainted line that separates the two halves. And if you like, you can even make the two halves slightly different values to give them some dimension. I also found that it was easiest to paint the jagged edges of the leaves first and then fill in the rest of the leaf with color. Now it's time to paint the leaf branches and veins. Now, you probably can still use a larger brush to do this if it has a nice pointy tip, but I decided to switch over to a smaller size round brush like this number 4 to make it a bit easier. So as you can see, I've started painting the thin branches first, and then I connect it to the leaves by painting a vein down the center of the leaf. Then I'll add some very thin vein lines to the leaves. To help keep your lines thin for this, after your paintbrush is loaded with paint, dab the side of it onto your paper towel to take off excess water and paint. And then very lightly use just the tip of your brush to paint the lines. Now using that same small brush, paint the stems and greenery surrounding the rosebuds. So I got to this point and realized I forgot to paint this tiny spot on this petal, so I'm quickly just painting that with some alizarin crimson. Okay, for this last and final detail, I'm going to take some alizarin crimson and some sap green and mix them together to create a nice brown color that I can then use to add some darker dots to the rose's centers. And here are your finished, beautiful wild roses. Thanks so much for watching today. I hope you had success and enjoyment in painting these flowers. If you did enjoy this tutorial, please consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.